Good day, learners. This is your accounting teacher, Sir AJ, and welcome back to my channel. So for today, we will be talking about another financial accounting topic, and we will be talking about employee benefits. So for this topic, we will be dividing the lecture into two parts. So this video is the part 1 of the accounting for employee benefits. So let's start this video. So as what I have mentioned earlier, we will be talking in this video, part 1 of accounting for employee benefits. So what we will be talking about are the following. First, we will be talking about some scope and key definitions from the standard. Number 2, we will be talking about short-term employee benefits. And number 3, we will be talking about other long-term and termination benefits. So first, the standard that governs employee benefits is PAS 19R. Bakit merong R, sir, sa standard? Because recently it was revised to simplify the accounting for employee benefits. So let's start with the scope and some key definitions from the standard. So the scope of PAS 19R, it shall be applied by an employer in accounting for all types of employee benefits, except those to which PFRS2 applies. Ano naman tong PFRS2? This is yung share-based payments. So we will have another discussion for that standard in the future. Next, PAS 19R does not deal with reporting by employee benefit plans because yung standard for employee benefit plans is PAS 26. The employee benefits to which PAS 19R applies include the following. Number 1, under formal plans or other formal agreements between an entity and individual employees, group of employees, or their representatives. Number 2, under legislative requirements or through industry arrangements, whereby entities are required to contribute to national, state, industry, or other multi-employer plans. And number 3, informal practices that give rise to a constructive obligation. So what are employee benefits? Technically, these are all forms of consideration given by an entity in exchange for service rendered by employees or for the termination of employment. This include 4 things. So ang mnemonics natin is STOP. S for short-term employee benefits, T for termination benefits, O for other long-term benefits, and P for post-employment benefits. The first 3 we will be discussing in this video, and the post-employment benefit, we will be discussing that in part 2. So employee benefits also include those provided to the employees or to their dependents or beneficiaries. So pwede rin yun. And may be settled by payments made either directly to the employees, to their dependents, or to others, such as yung mga insurance companies. An employee may provide services to an entity on a full-time, part-time, permanent, casual, or temporary basis. For the purpose of PAS 19, employees include yung mga directors and other management personnel. So let's first define what are short-term employee benefits. These are employee benefits other than termination benefits that are expected to be settled wholly before 12 months after the end of the annual reporting period in which the employees render related service. So basta within 12 months mo babayaran, then that is short-term. Examples are wages, salaries, and social security contributions, paid annual leave and paid sick leave, profit sharing and yung mga bonuses, non-monetary benefits such as medical care, housing, car, free or subsidized goods or services for current employees. And what are termination benefits? Ang definition niya ay, these are employee benefits provided in exchange for the termination of an employee's employment as a result of either the following. First, entity's decision to terminate an employee's employment before the normal retirement date. Or B, employee's decision to accept an offer of benefits in exchange for the termination of employment. For other long-term employee benefits, these are all employee benefits other than short-term, post-employment, and termination. In short, this is just a residual definition. So pag hindi siya considered as short-term, hindi rin siya considered as post-employment, hindi rin siyang considered termination, then dito siya papasok sa other long-term. Examples: long-term paid absences, yung mga matagal na paid absence such as long service leave or sabbatical leave, jubilee or other long service benefits, long-term disability benefits. And finally, for post-employment benefits, these are employee benefits other than termination and short-term that are payable after the completion of employment. So, more of parang retirement. Kasi, pag natapos yung employment mo because of the employer's decision to terminate you, then termination benefits yun. Pero, if na-complete mo yung employment in the normal retirement date, then that is post-employment benefit. Some examples are retirement benefits such as pensions and lump sum payments on retirement, or other post-employment benefits such as post-employment life insurance, post-employment medical care. So that's it for the scope and some key definitions. Let's now focus our attention on short-term employee benefits. So for the recognition and measurement, when an employee has rendered service to an entity during an accounting period, the entity shall recognize the undiscounted amount of short-term employee benefits expected to be paid in exchange for that service as a liability or accrued expense after deducting any amount already paid. If the amount paid exceeds the amount of the benefits, then meron kang prepaid expense or an asset. Letter B as an expense, unless another PFRS requires or permits the inclusion of the benefits in the cost of an asset. Example, past 2 inventories and past 16 PPE. So, ang entry mo kapag nagre-record ka ng short-term employee benefits ay debit expense and credit liability. And of course, credit cash if binayaran mo naman agad-agad. For profit sharing and bonus payments, the entity shall recognize the expected cost of profit sharing and bonus payments. So, expected cost. Kapag, number 1, the entity has already a present legal or constructive obligation to make such payments as a result of past event. And a reliable estimate of the obligation can be made. So kapag hindi mo na-meet na may present obligation ka or you can estimate the amount, then hindi mo i-recognize ang expected cost ng profit sharing. For paid absences, an entity shall recognize again the expected cost of short-term employee benefits in the form of paid absences as follows. Kapag accumulating paid absences, ibig sabihin, kapag hindi mo ginamit yung paid absence mo this year, it will be accumulated next year. So kapag ganun, you will recognize it when the employee surrenders service that increases their entitlement to future paid absences. Normally, for accumulating paid absences, you accrue it at the end of the year. There are 2 types of paid absences for accumulating. Vesting, ibig sabihin, employees are entitled to a cash payment for unused entitlement on leaving the entity. Meaning, kapag umalis sila tapos meron pa silang mga unused paid absence, babayaran sila in cash. Pero meron naman tayo ng non-vesting or they are not entitled to a cash payment for unused entitlement on leaving the entity. Pag umalis sila, at hindi pa nila nagagamit yung mga paid absences, technically hindi na sila babayaran, parang na-forfeit nila yon. In the case of non-accumulating paid absences, ibig sabihin kapag hindi mo nagamit during the year, then wala na siya next year. Only when the absences occur. So for non-accumulating paid absences, normally, we don't accrue at the end of the year kasi we just recognize it kapag nag-absent na talaga actually yung employee. So let's have an example. Kadita Company grants its employees 12 days paid vacation leave each year. Per company policy, employees are required to take vacation leave each year, but not necessarily for their entire vacation leave entitlement. Vacation leaves not taken during a year can be carried over indefinitely, meaning accumulating. Kadita has 500 employees with an average salary of 1,000 pesos per day. The average annual pay increase is 5%. During 2020, total vacation leaves taken by employees were 5,400 days. Based on experience, 90% of unused vacation leave for a year are taken in the immediately following year. The question is, assume that unused vacation leaves vest, how much should Kadita accrue as liability for unused vacation leave on December 31, 2020? Before we answer this question, please take note guys that nag-answer lang tayo kung magkano yung i-accrue na liability because in the first place, this is accumulating paid absence. If ito ay non-accumulating, then wala kang i-accrue na liability at the end of the year for expected cost the following years because you only recognize the expense as the absences occur kapag non-accumulating. So in this case, accumulating naman, so we can recognize an accrued liability. So how do we compute? Pag vesting, ganito. The total vacation leaves granted ay 6,000 days because there are 500 employees and each employee may 12 days. Yung mga ginamit na nila for the year ay 5,400. That means yung mag-a-accumulate or yung mga unused vacation leave na pwede pang gamitin the following years ay 600 days. And then the average salary per day is 1,000. Pero since this is an expected cost of next year, then we multiply it by 1.05 considering the 5% increase in salary. So that's 1,050 times 600. The accrued liability for unused vacation leave is 630,000 pesos. The entry for that date is debit salaries expense, credit salaries payable, 630,000. Why didn't we consider the 90%? Kasi vesting ito. So kahit umalis yung mga employees na yan, pwede naman nilang makuha pa rin yung mga unused leaves. So, vesting kasi. Pero question number 2, assume that the unused vacation leaves do not vest. How much should Kadita accrue as liability for unused vacation leave on December 31, 2020? For this situation, dahil non-vesting siya, pag umalis sila, wala na silang makukuha, then the computation is this way. The total vacation leave granted is still 6,000 days. Total actual taken is 5,400 days. Therefore, meron tayong unused VL na 600 days. Pero we will only consider the percentage of who will take the leave. Kasi baka yung 10% aalis at hindi na nila magagamit yung leave, then hindi yun sila babayaran. So we only consider the 90%. So multiply 90% and multiply by the average salary per day. Again, we consider the salary increase kasi this is expected cost of next year. So that's 1,050. The liability is 567,000. The entry for that date is debit salaries expense and credit salaries payable 567,000. So that's it for paid absences. For the disclosure for short-term employee benefits, PAS 19 does not require specific disclosures about short-term employee benefits. But other PFRS may require disclosure. For example, past 24 related parties require disclosure about employee benefits for key management personnel, and past 1 requires disclosure of employee benefits expense. So now let's go to the second type of employee benefit, which is termination benefit. For recognition, an entity shall recognize a liability and an expense for termination benefits at the earlier of the following dates. First, when the entity can no longer withdraw the offer kasi nag-offer siya na magbigay ng benefits sa mga employee. And letter B, when the entity recognizes cost for a restructuring that is within the scope of past 37 and involves the payment of termination benefits. For some exclusions, take note that the following are not termination benefits. Rather, they are post-employment benefits. Kailan ba mayroong termination benefit? Number 1, at the employer's decision. Kapag terminate nila yung employee. Pangalawa, employee's decision when he accepts the offer na binigay ng employer. So for the following, they are not termination benefits. Number 1, termination of employment at the request of the employee without an offer. So nag-resign lang. So hindi po ito termination benefit. Letter B, as a result of mandatory retirement requirements. So hindi rin to termination. For the measurement of termination benefits, if it is payable within 12 months, account for it similarly sa short term. If payable naman beyond 12 months, account it similarly with other long-term benefits. And number 3, if in substance it is an enhancement to post-employment benefits, then account for it as post-employment benefits. So kung papansinin nyo, for termination benefits, gagayahin niya lang yung accounting for some other types of employee benefits. So let's have an example for termination benefit. As a result of a recent acquisition, an entity plans to close a factory in 10 months. And at that time, terminate the employment of all the remaining employees at the factory. Because the entity needs the expertise of the employees at the factory to complete some contracts, it announces a plan of termination as follows. Each employee who stays and renders service until the closure of the factory will receive on the termination date a cash payment of 30,000. Employees leaving before closure of the factory will receive 10,000. There are 120 employees at the factory. At the time of announcing the plan, the entity expects 20 of them to leave before closure. So in this situation, the question is how much should be accrued as liability for termination benefits. Take note that the entity should account for the benefits provided in exchange for termination of employment as termination benefits kasi nga ito-terminate na sila. But it is accounted for similarly with short-term employee benefits kasi the benefits are payable within 12 months. So to compute the liability for those who will leave before closure, ang expectation natin is there are 20 who will leave before closure and they will be receiving 10,000 each. So ang total liability for them is 200,000. And for those who will stay until closure, the number of employees is 100. Kasi di ba yung total 120 employees? So if you expect that 20 will leave before closure, then that means ang expectation is yung mga magsistay 100. And they will be receiving 30,000 for a total liability of 3 million. So ang total liability natin expected is 3,200,000 which will be accrued as termination benefits. For disclosure of termination benefits, again, PAS 19 does not require specific disclosures, but other PFRS may require disclosures. For example, again, PAS 24 requires disclosure for key management personnel, and PAS 1 requires disclosure of employee benefits expense. Now let's focus our attention on other long-term employee benefits. For recognition and measurement, in recognizing and measuring the surplus or deficit in an other long-term employee benefit plan, an entity shall apply the same concept used in defined benefit plans. If you will ask how will we compute for this surplus or deficit based on the concept in defined benefit plan, we will discuss that in part 2 of this tutorial. For other long-term employee benefits, an entity shall recognize the net total of the following amounts in profit or loss. So lahat to sila sa PL or profit or loss, except to that extent that another PFRS requires or permits their inclusion in the cost of an asset. Ano yung mga ilalagay sa PL? Service cost, net interest, and remeasurements. Sa part 2, we will discuss ano-ano tong mga service cost, net interest, at remeasurements. But remember, for other long-term employee benefits plan, lahat sila sa PL. Okay? We will realize later that yung some of them sa OCI nilalagay pag post-employment benefit plan. Pero as far as other long-term employee benefits plan is concerned, lahat to sila sa profit or loss. Reimbursement right. What is this? When and only when it is virtually certain that another party will reimburse some or all of the expenditure required to settle a defined benefit obligation, ang entity ay first recognize its right to reimbursement as a separate asset. The entity shall measure it at fair value. And letter B, disaggregate and recognize changes in the fair value of the reimbursement right, in the same way as for changes in the fair value of plan assets. The components of defined benefit costs recognized may be recognized net of amounts relating to changes in the carrying amount of the right to reimbursement. So, if you're virtually certain na may magre-reimburse ng mga ginastos mo, then recognize it as a separate asset to be measured at fair value. And you recognize its changes in fair value. And for disclosure, same as short-term at termination, walang specific disclosure from PAS 19, but PAS 24 requires disclosure about key management personnel, and PAS 1 requires disclosure of employee benefits expense. So that would be all for the part 1 of employee benefits. It's your time to test your knowledge. So if you know the answers to these questions, type in your answers sa comment section. Question number 1, short-term employee benefits include all of the following except A, wages, salaries, and social security contributions. B, short-term compensated absences. C, profit sharing and bonuses payable in more than 12 months after the end of the period in which the employees render the related service. Or D, non-monetary benefits for current employees such as medical care, housing, car, and free subsidized goods. And question number 2, Uranus Company has 20 employees who are each entitled to 1 day paid vacation leave for each month of service rendered. Unused vacation leaves cannot be carried forward and are forfeited when employees leave the entity. All the employees have rendered service throughout the current year and have taken a total of 150 days of vacation leaves. The average daily rate of the employees in the current period is 1,000 pesos. However, a 5% increase in the rate is expected to take into effect in the following year. Based on the company's past experience, the average annual employee turnover rate is 20%. How much will Uranus Company accrue at the end of the current year for unused entitlements? A, none. B, 90,000. C, 94,500. Or D, 150,000. So again, if you know the answers, comment your answer down below. So that would be all for today. Thank you very much for listening and watching this video tutorial on part 1 of employee benefits. If you have questions, you may message me on my social media accounts. And if nakakalimutan nyo pa, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much sa lahat ng mga nakasubscribe na. Please do like, comment, and share this video. And please do remember that every day is an opportunity for us to learn something new. So that would be all for today. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!